well, how did it come to pass that across all cultures, or nearly all cultures, men on average have more resources? Well, as one biological anthropologist, I think this was Irv DeVore at Harvard, he said men are one long breeding experiment run by women. And basically one of the things that one of my first studies, the 37 culture study, documented is that women have a universal preference for men with resources. And so that sets up a co-evolutionary process whereby those men who were chosen as mates tended to be motivated and have the ability and willingness to acquire resources and share.
So let me ask you about that specifically. This is a question that I tried to address experimentally at one point, but I couldn't get the experiments organized properly to test this specific hypothesis. Do you know of any research pitting female mate choice in relationship to men against men who have resources versus men who show the traits that allow them to acquire resources, pitting those directly against one another?
Yeah, great question. And I'm not aware of any studies that have done that directly.
See, I think that, and this is, I want to talk to you about this in relationship to the dark triad issue, which we'll get into. It seems to me that women use markers of status partly as indicators of available resources because those are useful, but I don't think women are that uncanny, let's say. It's too simple. I think they use the presence of resources as a proxy for the personality and cognitive traits, let's say, including physical health, that would enable a man, even stripped of his current set of resources, to be highly likely to acquire them in the future. And maybe current resources are a good proxy for that.
Yeah, I think So one issue is that cash economies are relatively recent in our human history. I think maybe 7,000 to 10,000 years old or so. And so so we are able to stockpile economic resources in a way that is evolutionarily unprecedented due to cash economies. But I think that you're absolutely right that what women tend to look for, and this shows up even in my studies as well, is the characteristics that are statistically reliably correlated with resource acquisition, which will be things like intelligence, social status, dependability, athletic prowess. Is this guy a good hunter? So you go to a culture like the Ache of Paraguay, and basically what leads to high status in men is hunting skills. That's like the big main effect there. And so I think even things like, that I know you've talked about this and you measure them as some of the big five characteristics, even things like emotional stability and conscientiousness, which we know is linked with hard work and industriousness and achievement in modern work context, likely was true ancestrally as well. So women didn't want a guy who's going to be sitting around in the hammock all day, smoking whatever the local, weed or hallucinogen is. She's going to want a guy who has the motivation to get out there and hunt and bring back the bacon, so to speak. Yeah. What are the causal origins of what you're calling patriarchy? And to get to that, you have to get to things like female mate preferences and the coevolution of those mate preferences with male mating strategies. And the part of male mating strategies is to prioritize resource acquisition and clawing their way up the status hierarchy and, selling their grandmother to get ahead. And studies of this gets to another sex difference, that women tend to allocate their time, energy, and investment across a wider array of, what we call adaptive problems. So, women more than men invest in kin. Even if they're married, they invest more in their in-laws, in their friendships, et cetera. And men, on average, tend to be more monomaniacal about getting ahead.
So you could say the most effective long-term strategy for smashing the patriarchy is for women to select low-ranking mates to sleep with.
Yes. So if you
I should get in lots of trouble for that.
Well, if women changed their mate preferences so that they didn't care about status and resources and those qualities, and you iterated that over enough generations, yeah, it would ultimately change male behavior.